We are back with this week's episode of Think Deeper. This week we're going to be talking about family worship and devotional time and setting up those habits in the home. But before we get to that, we've got so much to announce at Focus Press. A million things. It's a really exciting time. Lord willing, we're going to be putting out just more content than you could even believe between now and the end of the year. So I can't announce all of that right now. Some of it I'll let Joe and Will announce here in future weeks. The first thing we're going to announce is the second podcast on our network has launched. It's called Who Let the Dogma Out? It's a podcast I co-host with my friends Jacob Rutledge and Daniel Mayfield, a couple of gospel preachers in Texas and Oklahoma. And it's dedicated to really exploring the doctrinal beliefs that underlie everything we do and say and think. And so it goes a different direction from Think Deeper. It's a little more philosophical in that sense, where Think Deeper may be a little more hands-on. But if I know we got a lot of people who listen on your walk, on your commute. If you're looking for more Christian content, every Wednesday we'll be putting out from now through the end of the year, Lord willing, we'll be putting out an episode of Who Let the Dogma Out. The first one launched about the need to be dogmatic. We'll be talking about the inerrancy and sufficiency of Scripture here in the next couple of weeks. And so be sure to click over on your podcast app, on YouTube, wherever you're listening, and subscribe to Who Let the Dogma Out as well. And then along with that, I said we've got a lot to announce. Go to focuspress.org, sign up for that email list that we have. There's a pop-up that comes up. Sign up for that. Once a week, we'll send you an email. Every time we have something new to announce, it'll be in that email. Keep an eye out for it, and you will have all the latest. We've got more podcasts coming. Who Let the Dogma Out is the second. But we're going to have at least 4 by the end of the year, and maybe a 5th and a 6th into the new year with different focuses, different target audiences for some of them. We're going to have books coming out. We're going to have videos, Bible study deep dives that Joe's got coming. Again, way too much to announce at one time, so be sure you're subscribed to the email list at focuspress.org so you get those updates as they're released. Just such an exciting time. So much Christian content for your walk, for your family, for your church. Be sure to get on board with that email list so you see everything as it comes out. But with that, I'm going to have to rein myself in rather than just keep going on about everything we've got. So let's go ahead and start in on what we've got to talk about for this week. Our topic this week is a really important one that Christian families, Christian couples, and I think we'll even get a little bit, not much, but a little bit to even Christian singles should get into this habit of worship at home, family worship. That not just personal devotional time, but really taking that time to sing to God, to read the Word aloud, to make room for that especially in the life of the family. We're talking about this. Well, we had it on our schedule from the start of the year, but we're especially getting to it right now because Will just released a family worship guide through Focus Press. So we'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end. He'll tell you what that's about, what it looks like, and all of that. But let's get started on the importance of discipling your children, the importance of worshiping at home and practicing these things, bringing it home and not just leaving it at the church building. Will, why don't you get us started?
Sure. We talked a few episodes back about the Great Commission. We really talked about discipleship and the emphasis that Jesus places on that in the Great Commission, and how much of a role that is for Christians to go into all the world and make disciples. Right, that's the whole Great Commission. But we really didn't spend a lot of time talking about this idea of discipling kids at home. And Jack briefly mentioned a second ago that this idea of family worship obviously applies to singles as well, and people without kids, and couples, I should say, without kids. But the premise for this episode is going to be a lot about discipling children, a lot more, I guess, geared towards families with children. If you are single or if you are married without kids, don't tune out. There's obviously still a lot of principles that are going to apply here. But for this kind of first block, we do want to talk about the importance of discipling our kids and kind of what that looks like. And obviously, the main text that everybody goes to is usually in the Old Testament for one of the main texts, I should say. That being Deuteronomy 6. Obviously, you've got Ephesians chapter 6 as well. Fathers, don't provoke your children to wrath, but train them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. But Deuteronomy 6 has really always been just the perfect place to go when parents are looking for, I don't know if you want to call it a recipe, or just the pattern of what it looks like for raising faithful kids. Deuteronomy chapter 6, obviously you got the Shema, you got the call in verse 4, but starting in verse 5, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. That whole idea of you are communicating to your children, to your family about God at every opportunity that is presented. Look at what all verse 7 covers. When you sit, when you're sitting, when you're walking, when you're going to bed, and when you're waking up. That pretty much that covers a broad span of time. And so that's a question that we as Christian parents, we need to ask ourselves. Are we truly teaching our children about God at all of those times? That was something that was a big deal for the Israelites. God did not just want one generation of Israelites that was going to enter the promised land to remain faithful. What did he want? Multi-generational faithfulness. He wanted that first generation. Hey, you make sure and you teach your kids, even though they didn't walk across the Jordan on dry land, even though they didn't see the miracles in the desert. You teach them, you remind them, you tell them so that they can have that same faithfulness. Joe, I want to kick it to you before we get into any other scriptures. This concept of discipling children and this, going to Deuteronomy 6, what do you have to add as, other
Yeah.
scriptures and things that parents can derive from these places?
Well, I actually want to go back to verse 1 of Deuteronomy 6, because he says, "Now this is the commandment, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord your God has commanded me to teach you, that you might do them in the land where you are going over to possess it." Okay, got it. Take myself. Verse 2, "So that you and your son and your grandson might fear the Lord your God, to keep all his statutes and his commandments which I command you, all the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged." Verse 3, "O Israel, you should listen and be careful to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, just as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey." A few different directions we could go with this. The first, obviously, we've talked about the need for Christians to have kids. I think this is another one, to multiply greatly. There, as Israel is going into the promised land, I mean, it's hard to say anything other than they were to breed them out, pretty much, like to have so many Israelites that they just take over the land. So I think there's some principles there. I won't get into that. The interesting thing here, Will, as you talked about, multi-generational faithfulness. We see we see us, we see son, we see grandson. He's going to talk about the fathers. There's 4 generations represented in this passage here. And here's my question. I'll throw it to you guys. Multi-generational faithfulness, for those that have heard this phrase, have probably heard it from the denominational world. This is not something very much discussed in the church. Matter of fact, I don't think I would have known the phrase had it not been from the denominational world discussing this idea of multi-generational faithfulness, the importance of it. We see the importance here to make sure that we're training up our kids, but all the way down to the grandkids. Somehow we get grandparents who think that this idea of discipling their children and family worship and making sure the family stays faithful, well, that's the parents. Now my job is just to spoil them, right? Now my job, no, your job is to also help raise them up into the Lord. But I'll throw it to you guys. Why do you think the Church of Christ either doesn't have an equivalent or doesn't very much talk about multi-generational faithfulness? Why is that mainly or predominantly a denominational term?
In my experience, we shy away from discussions of youth faithfulness. There's a little bit on parenting. There's people who maybe do a parenting seminar or something like that. But we're very doctrine focused. Baptism, instrument. We talk about that kind of stuff. We've mentioned that on the podcast before, and some do. This is not, I'm sure there are those that do, and those that are very much emphasizing.
Right, it's a generalization.
Right, it's a generalization,
Sure.
but it's something we need to get serious about. And one of the other things is we very much, and this is not just us. This is something that happens a lot. Is very Old Testament shy. And the Old Testament is where a lot of this is born out. And we were talking right before we got on and recorded how the kings demonstrated how badly this goes when you don't pass it on, when you don't disciple your children and teach them and do what Deuteronomy 6 is calling them to do, is you lose that opportunity. And so the New Testament has some verses on parenting, but this Deuteronomy 6 thing, it establishes principles that, okay, we're not teaching our kids the old law as such, But the principle of talking about it, day and night, and really centering your family life around the Word and around God and around serving Him and worshiping Him, that doesn't change. That's not something that we're supposed to just, oh, that doesn't count anymore because it's Old Testament.
This is the interesting thing for me, and this is more, I'll answer my own question. Does it not seem like the church has a very individualized focus or go out and seek those who are lost, as we should, Great Commission, I'm not saying we shouldn't, but it seems to me that the greatest mission field begins at home, making sure that we are discipling our children, making sure they are faithful, making sure that we are, getting them in a proper place with God. But instead, we focus on, and a lot of the sermons are based on how you can individually be better as a person and how we can go out and save those outside the church. How many times do you hear sermons about the need to not just keep your children faithful, your grandchildren as well? You just don't hear that.
It's almost like it's such a personal issue that we don't want to touch it, right? Like, oh, that's their business. That's their own kids that combine it with the sad reality that a lot of elders don't have faithful kids. It's almost made the list of taboo topics in a way. And that might just be, imaginary for me, but I really do view that as, preachers kind of stay away from that because they view it, well, that's kind of too personal. That's kind of over the line. That's getting into other people's business. But that's such a central part of really the entire Bible. But obviously, as Jack was talking about, the Old Testament, the Israelites, that was a concept that was taught over and over again. You got the Proverbs, my son, hear these. It was about passing on, the faith, passing on this knowledge of God. And what we see today, and maybe, Joe, this is a symptom of the fact that we don't really, talk about it, hear sermons much about it anymore, is we've got a lot of families, generalizing here again, but we've got a lot of families that family worship at home is completely absent from the picture. It doesn't happen. They view Bible class, they view the sermons, they view the church organized activities as sufficient. What's the problem with that? Let's get into that, because we want to very much bring it into today's terms for everybody listening. We've got all kinds of things going on. Why is it so important that, and again, we're going to target fathers here because of how critically important it is that fathers are the spiritual leaders. In fact, with this family worship guide that we'll talk about a little bit later, that we just released from Focus Press, we actually put in the introduction, look, this entire worship guide was put together under the premise of fathers leading the spiritual discussion, leading the worship. And we put in the guide. Obviously, we know that that is not applicable in all circumstances, but as a general rule for the normal family unit, this falls on fathers. As the spiritual leaders of the home, they are responsible for making sure that their family is involved in growing together as a family at home through worship to God. So let's get into that. Jack, I'll kick it over to you. Why is this so important? Why are we devoting a whole episode to this?
Because drawing from the Old Testament, you look at the father was the connection between the family and God. He was kind of the family priest in a sense. And yeah, we had the patriarchal era, and then the Mosaic age came about. But still, even after that, the father led the family, and that worship was expected to go on outside of just the temple. Yeah, you had the priesthood, but the family was expected to continue these things on. And while we're here in Deuteronomy 6, he talks about it's when you do the things that, when you're keeping the law, when you're observing, when you're worshiping, when you're sacrificing, when you're doing the things that the law commands you to do, your children are going to ask you, well, why do we do this? Why do we have this habit? Why do we
that was the whole purpose of the memorial stones in Joshua 4.
Right, the Joshua 4. What is this for? Why these? Why is this here? Why the Passover? Why are we doing this lamb? Why? And it's this. The questions offer the opportunity to teach, and with those questions, then you can say, here's why this is so important. And so when the Bible isn't open in your home, when you're not fellowshipping with other Christians, when you're not worshiping, when you're not taking family devo time, all of the habits that we try and are in this specific episode, but just in general, dedicating yourself to the church, being there when the doors are open, all of these things that Christians should practice, that's where you get the opportunity to teach your kids. And I've used this in my Lost Generation seminars of parents understand how to turn their kids into fans of their favorite football team, right? On Saturdays, you pull up, the everyone grabs the snacks, you get on the couch, you sit down and you watch your college football team. And man, you buy your son a jersey, you buy him a hat, you buy him a t-shirt, you put a poster on his wall of, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, whoever it is your team roots for. And your kid grows up knowing this is what we do, this is who we are. We root for such and such university, and I talk about this with my dad, and this is something that we share in together. And so when you do that as a church family, or I mean as a Christian home, saying, hey, this is what we do. We worship God together. We talk about the Bible together. We read these stories and take them in together, and we sing these songs together. Man, my kids just absolutely love picking the song and singing, and sometimes we not being irreverent, but we have fun of it. Like let's really sing. Let's get loud this time, and Jesus loves me, and they're part of it. It's part of our family routines, and it teaches them in that same way.
Will, you've discussed, I think in the last episode, maybe in two back, you brought up how much time we have in the week, and
Sure.
What is that? 168 hours, I think is what you'd said.
Yeah, and then you subtract the 8 hours a night on average for sleeping, so that takes you down to what, 112. Yeah,
112. I mean, let's just say, yeah, you subtract the 8 hours a night, you subtract the 8 hours of work, and let's even go to 10 hours. Either way, you've got so much time left. And yeah, I realize, driving and things like that take up time, and eating and things. But when we boil it down, how many of us are getting more than, especially growing up, how many people got more than the 3 hours of Bible study time between the sermons and the Bible classes on Wednesday night, Sunday? And that's assuming you're there every time the doors are open. So you got a Wednesday night hour, you've got a Sunday morning hour, and then you've got a Sunday morning and Sunday night. Let's just say that adds up to 30 minutes each. Long-winded preacher, that'd be me. A lot of preachers want to keep it around the 23-minute mark. So you're hitting somewhere around 3 hours of Bible study per week if you're not doing anything at home. And unfortunately, I think that's the case. Jack, I think you've got the numbers. There was didn't folks press to a survey, what was it, 2013?
Yeah.
And I think, get into that a little bit.
So it was of people who had left the Churches of Christ. We had almost 700 respondents. It was the largest survey of its kind that at the time it might still be, of people who had left the Churches of Christ. And we asked them all kinds of questions, but the one that always was most interesting to me was Bible study habits, Bible that they were exposed to. 61% of those who left attended Bible class regularly, Sunday morning, Wednesday night Bible class. They were there for those. Only 13% of them rarely or never attended Bible class. So, 87% said...
So they were fairly faithful Bible class attendees.
Yeah, they were kids.
These people that were leaving.
Kids who were in church, youth group. Yeah, they were getting their 3 hours. But of Bible time in the home, 1 to 2 times per week or less, 74%. So the people who, their families, just weren't opening the Bible hardly ever. In fact, 1 to 2 times per month or less, 49%. So half of the people said the Bible was open in their home less than once or twice a month of those who fell away. So again, in Bible class, in worship, hearing sermons, hearing classes, devos, things like that, but not at home.
And we're losing close to 74%, aren't we?
That's what I was going to say. That's why this is one of the reasons why this is such a big deal is because, goodness, how many episodes now have we brought up the youth unfaithfulness and how many young people are walking away from the church? But it's not even just youth that are walking away from the church. It's young people that are technically, physically still in the church, but are saturated in worldliness or are, not contributing to the work of the church or are, just kind of there. They're apathetic. They're lukewarm. That if you incorporate those people into that number of people that of the young people that have walked away, this is a huge problem. And this is something, of course, that's worth discussing, which is why we're having this episode on it. But those stats that Jack just read just go to show how many quote unquote Christian families kind of view, Joe, like you're bringing up, the Bible classes and sermons that's sufficient, right? And hey, if they get to hit a youth devo once a month, then they're going above and beyond. We view in a general sense, church organized events and Bible classes, we view those things as sufficient when they shouldn't be. If worship or study time with your family, if time spent with God, sitting in the living room with your kids, if that is regulated to only within the 4 walls of a church building, if that is regulated to 4 hours a week, that is almost guaranteed a recipe for your children being saturated in worldliness. That's virtually the opposite of what we started this episode out in Deuteronomy chapter 6 of talking with them about God when you're sitting, walking, when you wake up, when you lie down. That's the opposite.
Well, so let me throw this in. Thinking about when you, when you walk by the way and when you lay down and everything. How many young kids have an iPad or a TV in front of their face? They're fulfilling Deuteronomy 6. It's just not with scripture. I would mention something like SpongeBob, but I guess that's probably more my generation. We were not allowed to watch SpongeBob. I'm trying to think of a more relevant.
I've never seen one episode of SpongeBob ever.
I don't think I have either, actually. I know that was huge when I was growing up.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm trying to think of like a relevant example to today. I have no idea. Our listeners probably don't care or know either.
Our kids are
they
3,
really
4
dumbed down
years,
TV?
Yeah, our kids are 3 and 4 years old, so it's like Paw Patrol. I don't know anything beyond
that's
that.
exactly
I just introduced Jackson to a TV, and it was sports. It was nothing cartoon.
There you go.
My man.
He was watching college football with me. So
See, you're
So
discipling him into college football.
Yeah, that's right. Train up a child in the way he should go. But no, anyway, the point that I'm making here is that's how we're discipling our kids. How many hours a week is your kid getting PJ Masks or Paw Patrol or whatever else instead of getting the Word of God? Or as they grow, how much time are they spending on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook?
Netflix,
they have devices. Right. They have devices in their hands, as Deuteronomy 6 says, when they lie down, when they rise up, when they walk by the way, when they're seated at the table. Like, they are getting discipled by something other than the Word of God. Then we're shocked when they walk away from God and go, "Oh, wow, I thought we did our best." Well, did you really?
Well, this is one of the other things of, okay, you can use this test of like how many TV shows can they name? How many TV show characters can they name? How many, even sports, can you name the lineup of your favorite team and who plays all the positions and, who's the coach and they can name all that. Can you name the 10 Commandments? Name the 12 Apostles?
This was Jack, I'm not sure if this was the same survey, but it might have been a different survey that Focus Press did, but there was a question, how many of the minor prophets can you name? And there were, a bunch of, oh goodness, I have no idea. Or maybe they can name 1 or 2. And then another question, how many of the Kardashians can you name?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And people nailed those. And so I think that's what you're getting at is we can name all that stuff, but we can't name the books of the Bible in order. We can't name the minor prophets. And it just goes to the
I want to say this, though. Somebody would say, well, that's just because we're saturated in the culture. I've never watched the Kardashians, but we're saturated in such a culture. It's like, yeah, it's your job to make your home that kind of saturating culture for the Word. So that your kid, because you're right. You can't get out of it's very hard. I've got a friend who I was kind of teasing the other day because he just doesn't know any celebrity. He doesn't know who Harry Styles is, and it's like, what a blessed life you live. But the rest of us, you can't help but like be immersed in this culture that's always talking about these people, and yeah, make your home that kind of thing where your kids just can't help but know, who the apostles were. They can't help but know what the 10 Commandments are. They can't help but go around singing not songs by Billie Eilish, but Bible songs, and that's what Deuteronomy 6 is telling you to do.
Where'd you find this friend? Like, were you out picking rocks? Because he had to be living under.
That's the funny thing is he's on Twitter, and I'm like, my man, how?
Are you serious?
Yeah, if he's listening,
this guy,
shout out.
Joe's a big Harry Styles guy. Yeah.
Zip it. That's hey, you don't out me like that. No,
sorry about that.
Music's pretty good, but anyway. I want to get into, unless fellas, we got anything else to add specifically on the time portion. I want to get into and transition.
Well, I do real quick. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Go for it.
I do have something
go for
real quick because this is not a public school episode. We have another episode about that. But add to this issue of time that if your kids are in public school, then this issue is magnified even more because not only now is their time being used, 8 hours of sleeping, their time is being used at school. If they're doing extracurricular activities, that's even more time. So you have a very short window of time, and it's going to be typically at night because you work, your kids got school. What are you doing with that time at night? Obviously, if your kids are homeschooled or maybe a different type of schedule, it's not as big of a deal. But with the majority of kids in the church being enrolled in public schools, what are you doing from the hours of 6 to 9 o'clock? What are you doing? And again, those are nights that maybe some of those nights are used up by football games or band camp or whatever it is. And so that's part of this is that parents have to be so incredibly diligent about the small amount. And we're going to get into obstacles here in just a second, but we as parents have to be so diligent about how are we using the 2 hours at night that we have with our kids at home. How are we using those 3 hours, the 7 to 9 hour, whatever it is? And I'm, again, isolating that nighttime portion because, again, let's face it, our mornings are slammed with work and school, our days, our afternoons. Nighttime is really, again, if you're public schooled, about the only time you get it, even if you're involved in extracurricular activities. So again, that's a question that parents are going to have to face. But Joe, sorry to cut you off. That's just something I wanted to bring up. Again, if your kids are enrolled in public school, you have even less time to truly disciple your children and kind of offset all the worldliness that they're facing at school.
Well, in my opinion, I mean, you just can't begin to offset it.
Right. Yeah. That's
because
again,
it's simple math, time portion. You're at school for 8 hours. You literally don't have another. Okay, they're 8 hours of sleep, 16. You got 8 hours left in the day. So you better be, in order to offset what they're getting at school. You better. And I'm not saying you have to do Bible the same as school, but I'm saying
go back and listen to our episode. I think we titled it "Abandoned Public Schools" to get the full picture there.
Yeah, anyway. Exactly. But I want to discuss difficulties or some of the obstacles, I guess, that sometimes get in the way. And we just discussed this so well, to your point. Some of I think the first big obstacle would be the busy schedules. And to go along with that, I guess, the exhaustion of parents. Because as you're talking, I think a lot of this takes place at night. A lot of the time that we would have would take place at night. And I think parents are just exhausted, especially if it's a two-parent working home, right? Where both the mommy and the dad are working. The last thing they want to do, just getting food on the table is hard enough. The last thing they want to do is really crack open the Bible and take an hour or take even 30 minutes
all day. And so to, turn on their brains again for another 30 minutes to an hour is just, something that, not everybody wants to do. Right.
Right. So typically to turn on the TV, and maybe even watch a family show together, whatever it is. Or sometimes they'll do Bible, but it's inconsistent. I think that's better than none, obviously. But I think the busy schedules would be the first obstacle here. And let me just say this, once again, this is not a public school episode, but we were homeschooled. And one of the things I appreciate the most about the way my mom and dad did it is we started every day. We had to be at the table at 8 o'clock, right? Dressed, beds made, all that stuff. And the first thing we knew, you get your breakfast and we're doing Bible. And we do Bible for the first hour of the day from 8 to 9. We did all sorts of stuff. We did character building stuff. We did some really cool, like kids exegesis stuff. There's some books out there that teach you how to do that from a very early age. My mom spent a lot of time digging into what curriculums or whatever that she wanted in terms of Bible. And it was really cool to start the day off with Bible. And the days that we started to do that, things seemed to get a little bit better than when it was just chaos in the mornings. And so I do think that that's something that homeschooling, or if you get up early enough for public school, I think it's really tough to do, but that's something that homeschooling can afford, is you work that into your day. But to go back to the same obstacle, or to the obstacle or the difficulty, which is busy schedules, fellas, is there anything you'd add specifically to that?
I mean, it is a fair concern. I would say you guys have mentioned 30 minutes or an hour. It doesn't have to be, and especially this is one of the other things I think we'll talk about is flexibility on age range. The older your kids get, maybe you can spend a little longer. As I said a minute ago, all of our kids here are under the age of 5. In fact, we've got my twins, Joe's baby, Jackson. They're not really paying attention, but still, they know it's just going to be.
Jackson does not know all the words to Blue Skies and Rainbows.
Yeah.
Surprisingly,
doesn't know all the words to anything, does he?
Yeah, exactly.
But they can sit there and just enjoy hearing you sing. But my oldest is 4. We do 20 minutes. 15 minutes really.
Sure.
I read usually 10 to 20 Bible verses, whatever a section kind of makes up. We talk about it, we go around the table and give thoughts. Usually the kids don't have any thoughts. Every now and then she'll jump in with something of she heard a word that maybe is familiar, something else we've talked about before, and make the connection. It's really cool. My wife might say, well, what does this mean? Or she'll have a thought about, that reminds me of this, and then I'll kind of explain, just briefly teach it, briefly pull out a couple points, and we sing 3 songs, songs the kids like. Jesus Loves Me, but we can also teach them other ones, Victory in Jesus, I'll Fly Away, things like that. Any prayer request, or we go around, what are you thankful for? Everyone says something they're thankful for. We say a prayer. 15 minutes, we're done. And so that busy schedule.
But again,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just say from a very young age that they're not even going to remember. They're growing
Right.
up in a family where that is a central part of their, I guess it was it nightly routine for y'all
Yeah.
of y'all's
Well,
routine,
and
right?
and so we've tied it to dinner, and so busy schedule. You're already sat at the table anyway. You're not having to like go and round everybody back up. Hey, stop playing with your toys. Stop doing this. Stop whatever chores Alice and I are into. We're already there, and so before we get up, let's just take a few extra minutes while we're here, and then it's then we, and so it is hard with busy schedules. I mean, 4 kids under four or 4 and under is chaos, but we still manage. Sometimes we'll have a baby hollering, the whole time. You just go ahead and talk a little louder. But um, it,
My
it
schedule's been,
I was just gonna finish
sorry,
by saying it comes back to if you want to get it done, you just do.
my schedule's been just ridiculously busy recently. Picked up some clients, things like that, which is all good. And, work is, I enjoy work. But I don't always make it home for dinner. Sometimes I'm out, stay out with clients and I do Zoom. Of course, I'm here at the building, and doing from here. But um, sometimes I don't get home for dinner. One of the things that I really appreciate is that Alyssa she got a 365 days of the Bible, and it's just a one-page thing. Same for you, Jack. And we were supposed to get into this later, I guess, the practical how to do this, but we just do it in the
Yeah,
mornings.
we're all over the place
Yeah,
outline wise.
a
Sorry.
little bit out. That's okay, but um, I mean, it's really cool that I know she's still doing it, even when I have to leave a little bit early for the office, whatever it is, that we're still doing that. We still go in, sing some songs, do a prayer. Like, it is going to be different for each. I do work some 12-hour days where it's just not feasible for me to get home and be able to do some of these things. That's the importance of two parents being involved as well. I know it's mainly the father's role, and so I try to do everything I can. And that's something that I probably need to work on in setting parameters around my schedule. That's another thing to think about on the busy schedule. But I want to switch to the second one. The second difficulty, which first again is busy schedules, the second would be a lack of cohesiveness as a family, which hits me because as a therapist, of course, I do family therapy. I see this a lot where the family is just. I think cohesive is a good word. We'll put the outline together, and I think that's a really good word to use. Like, there's just not that glue where we feel close enough. We feel like, first off, we can sit down for a 15 minutes, a little Devo, whatever it is, where we can do that consistently. Some people are having a tough time just sitting down at the table and eating a family meal together, which makes this really difficult. But there's just a lack of cohesiveness with a lot of families where I think that's a key problem in and of itself. We could probably spend another episode on that. But, well, I could tell. What thoughts do you have? I could tell something's coming up for you.
Yeah. Well, again, I guess this would maybe be more of a problem when your kids are a little bit older, but we brought up the screens before. Everybody's got their device. Everybody's got their Xbox, right? Their TV in their room. And so what you see a lot of times is you got family with, let's say, 3 kids. They've had dinner. They're at home. Maybe there's nothing going on. What is everybody doing? They're all on their own device, right? They're fragmented. One kid is in their room playing Xbox. The other one's on their phone doing social media. Maybe the dad is watching sports. Maybe the mom is on her computer doing work things. But the point is, a lot of nights the family is fragmented. They're not together. Maybe some nights, again, to get back to the busy schedules thing, you got one kid playing this sport, you got another kid at this practice. It's just, again, we're not trying to say that extracurricular activities are bad in and of themselves. What is bad in and of itself and what is a problem is like what Joe just brought up. If your family is not together as a unit, if y'all can't find time 5 nights out of 7 to gather around for dinner, I'm going to go ahead and say that is a pretty big problem. If you can't find time to eat a meal together as a family, then how on earth are you going to find time to worship together as a family? So the busy schedules one is a big deal. To me, this one is even more of a big deal. And this one is something, again, we're not putting an embargo on extracurricular activities. What we are saying is, again, to place it on fathers, you as a father, any fathers listening, you as couples, as parental units, you guys need to decide what is most important for your family. What are you going to choose to prioritize? Is it most important that your child plays every high school sport they can? Is it the most important that your children be the most well-rounded and play the most instruments and whatever else it may be? Or is it more important for you to spend time together as a family, eating a meal, incorporating maybe your family worship time into your meal time, whatever it is? If you guys are, if you as a family are not together, if you're not cohesive, if you're not worshiping together, that is literally the recipe for your children walking away from the faith. If your kids are on their own devices, fragmented, away from home, again, 5 nights out of the week, that is one of the biggest obstacles and difficulties to this idea of leading your family at home in this family worship.
It's very. I was just looking up stats on it because it's very hard to get an accurate number, but it seems to indicate over 50% of families struggle to have nightly meals together. Like there was one that said as low as 30% eat dinner together every night. Others said, "Oh, it's really not that bad. Maybe it's 60% do, 40%." In any case, it's very common for that not to happen. But one of the other things is we talked about media addiction and all that. I've had dinner with people in their home where the kids are on the iPads at the dinner table. Like have to be watching something, or I think we've got on our outline here if it's easier to sit in front of the TV or just turn the TV on, and so everyone like you've got something going in the background. And what you're doing, as you said, you're not cohesive as a family, and what that is teaching your kids to do, or what that's going to create, is that your kids don't feel a connection with you, don't feel a loyalty to you. They don't feel that culture that they're a part of, and that's where you see a family all divided, and kids look way less like their parents ideologically than they do their friends. And
Right.
that's not a healthy thing. You want your kids to have friends. You want your kids to have social connections and be building those skills in their life, but you also want your kids to hold the values of your family. It's almost viewed as like a negative thing. Oh, you're indoctrinating your kids. Like, yeah, actually, I
That's
am.
what you're supposed to do.
Because
right?
as we said on another episode, if I'm not, somebody else is, and that's what happens when there's not a family cohesion. Is it's not parents saying this is who we are, this is what we do. Your kids are all defined by their friendships, by the people around them, by something else other than your connection to the Lord.
Consider the importance of family in the Bible. Abraham, right? It comes through one man, but really a family is what is promised, but that's also where the seed, where Christ is going to come from. And is he takes one family and he makes them a great nation in Israel. What are we called in the New Testament? We're called a family, right? We're the family of God. And so when that's the case, and he's building, one of the earliest things is there's marriage, which is the first institution, but then there's a family that shortly follows. We see the kids. I think this is the importance of genealogies being listed, is there is such an importance placed on family, on the generations, on who's coming down through these generations. And then what do we open Matthew with? What do we open Luke with? We open it with generations, right? With the genealogy that comes down into Christ. And so there's a huge focus placed on the idea of families in the Bible, going back to the very beginning, all the way to where we are now. And how do you think Deuteronomy 6 would be accomplished with people who basically have no use for their families? Oh, they're just in that teenage phase where they just only care about their friends. And the problem is, some people never come out of that phase. They end up being perpetual teenagers. You don't get me started on college and all the other things that keep us in our adolescence. But I think so many times, like we think that it's uncool to be a grounded part of our family. And that's such an American thing, because you look at other cultures in the world, like family's everything. You look at the Hispanic culture, and where they have multiple generations living in the house. You see that in Europe, you see that in the Middle East, right? We are very individualized. And so we look at it and we go, well, my family stinks. I care about my friends. Family is such a blessing from the Lord, and it's such a big part of the Bible that we see walked throughout Scripture, that this really saddens me when you see these Christian families who basically have no use for one another because they don't want to spend time together while they're just really into their friends. Parents, if you have that in as part of your family, you need to call it out. You need to check your own heart, check yourself. You need to get that fixed, like, immediately.
Well, and to get us back to our main point, is this is one of the benefits of regular family worship time, is you're fixing multiple issues. You're proactively doing good, but you're also getting rid of some of those negative things. If this is an issue, because this is one of those obstacles. Now, if you don't have that, that's great. Then excel still more, and add the family worship time. But if your family's divided in this way, this is a start toward bringing it back, because you need to bring it back. You need to create, again, a shared culture, a Christian culture in your home.
Right? Guys, I want to bring up something. And there is one more difficulty or obstacle that we have on the list, but it's going to very much tie into we want to kind of wrap up with the practical advice tips that y'all have sort of already gone into, but it's going to tie into that at the end. So I want to bring up something that I think is a little off topic, but we firmly believe this actually ties into the discussion quite well. Proverbs 22:6. Most people, I would imagine, are familiar with it. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. As quickly as we can, or long-winded Joe, maybe not. But is
don't
this
count on it.
is this a promise? In other words, when I read that, and it says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. When he is old, he will not depart from it." What is the antithesis of that? If a child does depart from what they were trained or what they were taught, then what does that mean? They were probably not trained up in the way that they should go. And if you view it in those terms, which little sneak peek, I do, a lot of, then you view it as a promise. And a lot of people don't think that. A lot of people are saying, no, that's, it's a proverb. It's more of a guideline. It's something that, it's not a guaranteed, if you train them up right, then they're always going to say that way. Funny. I usually tend to just take the Bible literally. But again, a lot of people have that alternative viewpoint. What do you guys say to that? Again, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. Is that a promise? Is that more of a principle or more of a guideline? What do y'all have to say for that?
Will's going to get a shot. It's one of those, we'll put him out, and then we'll kind of do the old Uriah where we just back off and be like, okay, well, that's yours. All right, let's move on.
Well, it's usually Joe, so I figure somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. You took the lead. I appreciate it, man. Take the arrows first. No, I very much agree with you. Is it a promise or is it a proverb? Promise or principle? I take it to be a promise. And what I'm hearing our listeners from afar saying is, as they're listening to this, is what would you guys know? Your kids are all under 5 years old. We haven't gotten to the point where our kids are walking away from the faith. So, are we allowed to speak on this? Could this get really, really difficult for me here in about 20 years? Yeah, it might. But I also think that those who are pushing it's just a general guideline, it's a principle, often have kids who are walking away from the faith. And I know we're coming on strong, this can be mean, but you know what? We're losing 75% of our youth. So when we talk about proverb, or is this just a regular proverb or is it a principle? Those who stand behind, well, it's just a proverb. It's like, well, maybe the parenting stunk. Okay. Maybe the parenting wasn't what it should have been, because how are we losing 75%? If
maybe they weren't trained up in the way they should go. Right. Yeah.
Correct. Principle or promise, regardless, irregardless, as some people say, regardless, your kids should stay faithful theoretically if you train them up proper, right? Why are we losing 75%? Maybe we need to look in the mirror as parents, focus it back on ourselves and say, hold on, did we do this right? Did we train them up? Were they watching SpongeBob for 5 hours a day? Or did we actually open the scriptures and talk about what God's doing in our lives and the grateful ways and worshiping him and gathering around the Bible and praying and singing and doing these things? Was that a priority in my home, or was turning on the TV at night a priority in my home? Was eating family meals together, around the dinner table, was that a priority? It was going through fast food time and time again and not ever really having a family meal more of a priority for me because I was too busy and failed to make it a priority. So when you really start shining the spotlight on our parenting, can we really say that we have done everything that we can to train children? And I'm not saying we get them into heaven. Please hear me there. Parents don't get their kids into heaven. God does, right? But the training up, we're training them up unto the Lord. We're trying to get them to understand what a privilege it is to know our amazing God, to love him with our entire heart, right? To truly fill out, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, mind, all of it. How would we best do it? If we saw that as our mission in parenting, I'm just a steward and my job is to return them to God so that they love him completely. Would that change anything that we do? Or would we prioritize maybe the Sunday morning baseball game over church? That's not my goal, is not to make them a baseball star. My goal is to return them to the Lord. How would that change the way we do our parenting? Sorry, I'll step off my soapbox, but yes, I'm passionate about this.
I think to answer that question, I would reroute it back to Deuteronomy 6, is if God didn't think that was a valid cause and effect, why did he base the land promise and the blessings and cursings on, if you teach this to your children, you guys are going to do well in this land, and if you don't, your children are going to go astray, and you're going to pay the penalty for it. And they did. And so he expected that if they actively did this, if you take on the law and you follow the law and you teach it to your kids and they keep it, you guys are going to just keep doing well. You're going to thrive. But I think that still, especially in the Christian age, works for all nations. If a nation learns of God and keeps passing it on, they thrive. If they don't, and so, man, everyone laments the good old days. Oh, back in the 50s, or back in the 60s. Well, we didn't used to have baseball games on Sundays. You know why we don't? Why we started having them? Because parents, church-going parents, started going, yeah, we'll skip for that.
Yeah.
There. Now you've got kids, you got multiple generations where it's not even a consideration that you should be somewhere else on Sunday but the ball field. All of these moral things, and people are like, oh, the nation was so much better. Kids are going to end up going to sin just like everybody else. All of sin and fall short of the glory of God. How does a nation go from generally moral to generally incredibly immoral, if not through a lack of parenting? And so cause and effect is a real thing. And so do you have 100% control over your kid? No. But there should be an effect to the cause of, if you have taught them this, if you've made it a part of their life, if you've helped their hearts be given to God, you're going to reap the benefits of that. And so, is it a guarantee? Is it 100%? You know what? Let's, like I said, just run it through Deuteronomy 6 of the long-term arc of this is going to be towards faithfulness if you do your job.
We talked about this in the generational podcast going back months, but I think we did at least. But the interesting thing for me, while these millennials with their participation trophies, I'm sorry, did the kid go out and buy it for himself? Who bought the participation trophy? Why do we always look down on the kids and go, well, these kids are just selfish? Where do you think they learned it from? That's not absolving us completely and saying that we don't go our own way, but there's such an individualized, once again, this is really what it comes down to, is the way that the East versus the West thinks is majorly different. And I think the East is right here. They're familially based. We are not. So we look down at the kids and go, well, they're just going to make their own way. They're going to do it. People in the East don't look that way. They don't think about it.
Read the Old Testament, Judges and all that. There was never a generation of faithful, solid, God-loving people who did everything exactly right and taught their families, and their kids just grew up and said, we're not doing that.
Right.
It was always a little compromise from the parents that led to big compromise from the kids. Well, we're not going to get rid of all the idolatrous people. We're comfortable. We kind of got our houses.
We're going to intermarry with the pagans, right?
Yeah, we won't tear down the high places.
Yeah, I mean, well, you guys can keep your high places. We'll do the rest, but we got rid of the rest of it. It always comes back around, and so it's your faithfulness has a huge effect on your kids. Before we get off the Proverbs 22:6 thing, so many people don't do the family worship thing. So many people don't do these things we're talking about of keeping the word and God in their homes. And so this question, well, is it a guarantee? You think you'd be worse off? You think it would have no effect? Well, it's just it's a nice thing to do, but whatever. I mean, come on, this seems like it would. Again, I don't think you can make any case that it would be a neutral activity.
And let me also say this, and then we can get off to Proverbs 22:6. But I also think we play a lot of defense in our training our kids. Here's how to defend the faith. Here's how to keep the faith. Here's how to write all the defense. What about fighting the good fight and going on offense with our kids? We're so concerned about our kids. Just please, please, please stay in the church. Please stay faithful. Hey, if you could just go to church on Sunday, that'd be fantastic. What about creating the next generation of leaders that go out and make a giant splash for the Lord, where and not for any personal accolades so that they might get the glory, but that God might get the glory, and we point them to being the best elders they can be, not just preachers, the best elders, the best deacons, the best men of God in their places of business and as employees. They are going to go on offense and pursue holiness and pursue Christ with everything they have. Enough being on the defense and acting like it's just enough if I can get my 25-year-old to show up to church on a Sunday morning. We've set the bar so stinking low that the kid hops over and we go, oh, and we cheer and act like we did our job. We didn't. Your kid ought to be conquering. He ought to have dominion over what he's doing. He ought to be the strongest man of faith he possibly can, or the strongest woman of faith that she possibly can. I'm going to shout out real fast and tease. Will and I are working on a project right now that we'll unveil here in hopefully the next month or so, about how to train young men to be truly godly young men that go out and change the world. They go out and they conquer nations. They go out and they have dominion, and they do amazing, incredible things. I think we've set the bar so low. So Jack, to your point there, I think that's great. I think it's how could it hurt if we do that? But we've got to stop thinking about, yes, we want to defend the faith. We also want to go on offense, and we got to start thinking about our kids being those arrows that we eventually shoot off into the world to make a big difference.
Right. Excellent point. Let's get to the practical advice and tips, and you guys have already said some of them, so if you want to reiterate them, that's fine. I'm going to hit the first one because one of the difficulties that we didn't highlight, because it's going to directly tie into this one, is a lot of families struggle to find a consistent routine with this idea of family worship. And I'll go ahead and say, growing up with my family, this was the one that we struggled with the most. Like Joe, our days usually started in Bible, so we were, studying the Bible in the mornings as part of our school curriculum. So that part was great. But when it came to nightly devotionals at home, we would get going and we would do great for, 8, 9, 10 days. And then, we'd go on a trip or something would come up and the routine would just go into the tank. And then we try to start it back up and then it would last for 4 days and it would go into the tank again. And so that consistent routine was our biggest struggle. And so growing up, that's what I observed. And I get, again, this it all ties together with the busy schedules and no consistent routine. So as far as a practical tip, practical advice, one of the things that I would say is set a flexible but firm designated time. And that might sound like a bit of an oxymoron, but by that I mean for 90% of the time, you need to have a window of time that is set in place. This is when we're going to do our family worship. Maybe it's like Jack's family where, hey, we're going to eat dinner. And then as soon as dinner's over, we're going to stay at the table. That's going to be our family worship time. Maybe it's right before everybody brushes their teeth and goes to bed. It's, the 9 to 9:30 hour, or 9 to 10 hour, whatever it is. So that part of it is firm, but flexible in the sense that, look, stuff's going to come up at, 1 or 2 nights out of the week. Sometimes, things are unpredictable. Sometimes there's a family emergency. Sometimes, a meeting might go long. Sometimes you've got stuff you're doing that night, whatever it is. So you're going to have to be flexible in that sense. But the important thing with that flexibility is to not grow lackadaisical with it. Like, we'll postpone it for tonight and we'll get to it tomorrow. If that becomes an option one day, that's going to be an option every single day. And so that would be the first piece of practical advice that I would have is, yeah, you got to be flexible, but you also have to have a pretty firm routine set, or once again, you're going to end up skipping it 4 nights out of the week, and it's going to become much less of a pattern. So that's the first one I've got. We got some others, guys. What do you have to add in addition to what y'all said a little bit ago?
Yeah, the second one is, I would say, ignore the clock. Now, look, it doesn't need to be, well, it has to be. We mentioned it, as Jack mentioned, right? 30 minutes an hour. That's a long time. Let's be honest. If we were planning, it's the same thing. Like, I'm sure we all have those friends that we haven't talked to in years, but it's always good to talk with them on the phone, but it's going to be 4 hours every time you jump on the phone. How often do you do it? Not very often, because I don't have 4 hours. The interesting thing is if we did it more often, we wouldn't need to talk for 4 hours, but that's just the way it goes, right? I think we do the same thing here. Is we build it up and it's like, oh man, I really need to, it's going to take me 30 minutes. I just don't have 30 minutes tonight. Ignore the clock. If you got 10 minutes, do it. But if it goes long, you get into a really good discussion. Well, 10 minutes, time for bed. No.
Right.
Your kid's asking questions, right? Your kid's asking questions. They're engaged. They're really enjoying this singing. And so are you. Let's go a little longer tonight. And tomorrow night, look, they're really tired. Things aren't going well. The kids are bouncing off the wall. You're having a really tough time just sitting them down. Still do it. Maybe tonight's 10 minutes. Maybe tonight's 15 minutes. But last night, we had a great time. Everybody was settled. It was such a good time. We went for 45 minutes. Ignore the clock, okay, is what I would say on the practical side.
That's the whole point behind this one is, we've belabored the point before about how our Sunday morning worship, man, when 11 o'clock hits, you got people that are looking at their watch and expecting the preacher to be done. We're so tied down to the clock that we restrict the worship of God to, it's got to be within this time frame. And so for our family worship, again, I'm not saying that, it needs to, take up your entire night, but I think, Joe, your main point here is don't let your family worship be restricted by, we got to be done in 15 minutes. If you do that, then you're heavily restricting the spiritual growth with your kids. Again, like you said, maybe y'all get into a really good discussion. Maybe your kids, maybe if your kids are older, you have them lead the prayer and they're pouring their heart out to God. And you're not looking at your clock going, man, they really supposed to be in bed at this point. That's kind of what we mean when we say ignore the clock. But Jack, what did you have?
Yeah, both good things. As you said, kind of part of ignoring the clock is sometimes your kids want to discuss it. That's one of the greatest things in the world. And so engage them in the discussion, ask them questions.
Open-ended questions.
One of the other things, open-ended questions, yeah. And One of the other things I've been trying to do is stack, if they're hearing the same thing, if it was Sunday morning Bible class or a sermon, or, we've got another little book that we'll read to them sometimes that has Bible stories in it. Hey, boy, I'm sure hearing about this Moses character a lot, kind of start triggering that in their brain so they can, well, Moses, wasn't he the guy who, yeah. And so, start building their learning base on those things. And so, on their age level. For older kids, ask them deep questions, challenge them, really push them. Younger, just get stuff that's going to start familiarizing them, but engage them. Don't make it, okay, we read it, let's sing, we're done, all right, we're out of here. Bring them into being a part of it. And that, again, Deuteronomy 6, that's part of what's supposed to happen, is you're having the discussion with them, and they're asking why this, why that. And so make that part of it as well.
I think that idea is so key, that the challenging them. Like, we so often use kid gloves because, oh, my kids just don't know that or whatever else. We want to keep it simple. I would push them just past their age range, right? Just past. Make them reach up a little bit. So for teens, do not shy away from the difficult scriptures. Go right at it. Discuss those things that maybe are not popular in the culture at all. Open 1 Timothy 2, verse 9 and following. See how that goes in your home, right? Women's roles and women are to remain silent. Things like that. Have that discussion and see how it goes with your kids. Open up into, what do we think about critical race theory? What do we think about these things? What does the Bible teach us about some of this stuff? You can use our podcast to maybe kick off some discussion, whatever it is. But more than anything, I would say, don't use our podcast, use Will's new book. And so I want to tee him off, unless there's other things we want to say. But I think from the practical end, I'll just briefly go through those one more time, then kick it over to Will. Set a flexible but firm designated time every night. Ignore the clock. If it goes long, great. If it's got to be a little bit shorter, don't beat yourself up, but ignore the clock and don't put a parameter on. I would say try to at least do 15 minutes or whatever, but ignore it. Engage your children in discussion and ask these open-ended questions, and then don't be afraid to dig deep into the scriptures to challenge your children on principles that maybe are not popular in the culture at all. That's okay. We want them wrestling with it at home and not their kids or their friends and their teachers discipling them. Things like that. So those are the practical tips that we would have on that. But this is where we get into the exciting, I think all of this has been exciting, but an exciting new thing that has come from Focus Press. So, Will, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you I think they just shipped out today, I believe. Go ahead and take that
They're
away.
supposed to be delivered today. Yeah. So,
Nice.
brand new it's just called the Family Worship Guide, produced by Focus Press. And again, it was actually my dad, I think, that originally, when we were all sitting around brainstorming, he kind of has had this vision for a while of the fact that this is a need for Christian families, to have home devotionals, to have home family worship together. And one of the things that we talked about was a lot of Christian parents just don't really know where to start, right? It's overwhelming. Well, do I just open the Bible and the first page I turn, that's where what do I do? And so we wanted to provide a tool, a resource to where Christian families, Christian parents were not overwhelmed, that they had, again, a guide, something that they could use. And so, again, I just want to highly recommend going and checking it out on focuspress.org. They were shipped, or they were delivered today. They're supposed to be delivered today, so they're ready to ship out. I'll real quick go over just kind of the way that the Family Worship Guide is laid out. If you have further questions, of course, feel free to call our office or hit us up on social media or whatever you'd like. But we did structure the Family Worship Guide to be about 30 minutes. But the beautiful thing is, once again, there's questions, there's discussion points where you could go longer if you've got the time or if your family is involved. So every day, so it's a 3-month worship guide. There's 3 months going through. The first month goes through the Old Testament. The second month really digs into the major and the minor prophets, lessons from those. And then the third month, we go through the New Testament. 4 weeks in each month, 5 lesson days in each week with a recap day to follow. The way that each day goes is every day you will, as a family, you will do 6 things. First of all, you will sing. We have listed a song that at least to some extent ties to the lesson. Of course, families can feel free to sing more than just one, but we've got at least one song for you and your family to sing. We've got a section of scripture, usually at least one chapter that you and your family are to read together. Again, highly recommend including your children on that. Hey, each of us read 4 verses, whatever it is, but you got a section to read. Then we have provided from that reading kind of sections, paragraphs of commentary. Here's some things to think about. Here's what this passage is saying. Here's here's some things for your children to consider. And each of those, or I should say, in that section, there are 2 discussion points for you and your family, where we put in there, hey, discuss this aspect of what we saw in this story, or discuss how we can see the love of God in this section of scripture. And each one of those is designed for you as a family to discuss that as little or as much as you desire. If that's something that your kids are, on a roll with, or you've got something that you're passionate about with that particular discussion point, man, go with it. And so again, for each lesson, you sing, you read, you discuss. There's at least 2 discussion points. And then after that, there's a challenge section in which we have really tried to make this applicable for all ages. So there's 2 questions for younger kids and 2 questions for older kids. Obviously, you know your kids better than we do. If you think your kids are maybe need to be asked the younger questions, or if they're on a deeper level, need to be asked the older questions, you as a parent can do whatever you'd like. But the younger questions are a bit more on the basic level, whereas the questions for the older kids are challenging them to think a little deeper. Hey, go beyond just the basic Bible story, and how does this relate into the grand scheme of the Bible? How do you see the elements of temptation here, and whatever it may be? Just some deeper questions. And so we tried to tailor that for kids of all ages. That's the challenge section, where they're going to have those questions. At the end, we have just 1 paragraph that you can either read verbatim or sum up yourself, that just kind of applies that particular lesson to the entire grand scheme of the Bible. And then last but not least, you pray together as a family. So again, structure it for 30 minutes. There's the way that we structured it. It can go longer. We even put in the introduction, if you guys get going on a discussion and you don't make it through an entire lesson for the day, no problem. Pick it back up the next night. We did not want anybody to get tied down to, gotta get done with 1 lesson per day. Again, the main goal with this is give Christian families a resource, a tool to really establish a pattern of worship in their home with their families. So again, we're excited about it. We really hope that it's something that is helpful for Christian families. And again, if you got questions about it, we'd love to answer those. But again, available to be shipped out today.
I do believe that this is the first of what I think is going to be many, right? So this is 3 months, but Will is going to be actively working on. We have some plans to go into other ones. This is a general overview through the Bible. We've talked about different ideas and maybe key biblical figures, whatever else. If you guys have some comments as to what you'd like to see in a family worship guide, we are in the process of outlining and writing those. Mainly Will.
I'll go ahead and tease. So in the Old Testament section, we did not touch Psalms, Proverbs, or Ecclesiastes. And the main reason for that is because probably another one of the volumes we will spend focusing exclusively on Psalms, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, to Joe's point, we hope to release many of these, just again, as tools and resources for your family.
Yeah,
absolutely. I was gonna recommend, if you're an elder or preacher listening, really consider buying these, making them available for every family in your church. We talked about all the reasons why this is important: keeping those kids faithful, building a culture of Christian families. Get a stack of them, pass them out, help them get into the routine, and teach them how to have this habit in their lives. And that family worship guide. What's so great is you might be listening to this and going, man, this sounds great. How do I start? There you go. Just grab the family worship guide. It give you a 3-month head start, and we might have another one out here eventually where you can keep going with those, or you just get in the habit of, okay, I know what to do now, I can run with it. But this is going to help you form that habit, and so, yeah, it's a really great product.
I should probably be...
Not only...
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, not only for the individual, but again, churches, I really recommend you passing these out to your people.
I should probably ask this off air, but I'll ask it on.
Boy.
I don't truly know. Do we have a PDF version of this that can potentially either be sold or be a companion for people when they go on vacation to be able to take it?
I don't think we have it yet. That definitely is something that is going to be in the works, though. So
okay,
good tease there, Joe.
We usually do.
There you go.
Yeah, we'll make digital available at some point.
Cool. All right, fellas. Well, as you can tell, I mean, we're really excited about it. We keep saying we got exciting things coming. This is the first of many things that are going to drop. We got some, I'm not going to say much. We really do have some really cool things that I think are coming up. We're going to work more on the family worship guides. We're going to try to put more effort into some family things. We're going to get more into men leading, and have maybe just an entire section on our site dedicated to men being men. Support groups, things like that. I mean, we got some really cool things in the works that, and we're hoping to to release a lot of these things before the end of the year. So stay tuned. We're just in September now, but of course, by the time this releases, I think halfway through September. But yeah, we're excited. And this is the first of many things that are going to be dropping between now and the end of the year that is going to be great. So as Jack said, yes, it's a plug for buying things from Focus Press. We genuinely believe in these things. Like I will be using this with my family. This is not some gimmick. Like we genuinely believe this is a fantastic resource. And so we just hope you avail yourself to that. But anyway, with that, fellas, anything else that you want to add before we wrap up? All right. We appreciate as always, give us a comment, like, comment, subscribe, as they say. But make sure to give us your comments on these things. You may disagree on the Proverbs 22:6. Don't blow us up completely. But if you have some comments on that, we'd love to hear.
But on the practical advice and tips side of things, if you have things that have worked for you and your family that maybe we didn't touch on, drop those in the comments. Again, we don't have a monopoly on everything that works. Maybe there's something that really works for your family that other people might benefit from. So feel free to drop that as well.
And send us your questions too. Send it on the Think Deeper Facebook page. We'd love to answer those if you do have some questions. We got a lot of resources. It's not just our collective knowledge. We got a lot of people that we talk to that know these things and that have done similar things for years. And so, but with that, we are going to wrap up. Thank you for listening to the Think Deeper podcast. We'll catch you next week.